34. When I refused to draw a picture for Mrs. Berman, she said, "Oh, you are such a stubborn little boy." "I am a stubborn little old gentleman," I said, clinging to his dignity and self-respect as best he can. "Just tell me what kind of thing it is in the potato barn," she wheedled. "Animal, vegetable, or mineral?" "All three," I said. "How big?" she said. I told her the truth. 8 feet high and 64 feet long. "You're kidding me again," she surmised. "Of course," I said. Out in the barn were 8 panels of primed and stretched canvases placed side by side, each one 8 feet by 8 feet. They formed, as I had told her, a continuous surface 64 feet long. They were held upright in back by 2x4s, and ran like a fence down the middle of the potato barn. These were the same panels which had shed the paint and tape of what had been my most famous and then most infamous creation, the picture which had graced and then disgraced the lobby of the GEFCO headquarters on Park Avenue. Windsor Blue, number 17. Here is how they came back into my possession, 3 months before dear Edith died. They were found entombed in a locked chamber in the bottommost of the 3 basement floors under the Matsumoto building, formerly the GEFCO building. They were recognized for what they were, with shreds of sateen Duralux clinging to them here and there, by an inspector from Matsumoto's insurance company, who was looking for fire hazards deep underground. There was a locked steel door, and nobody had any idea what was on the other side. The inspector got permission to break in. This was a woman, and, as she told me on the telephone, she was the first female safety inspector of her company, and also the first black. "I am 2 birds with 1 stone," she said, and she laughed. She had a very nice laugh. There was no malice or mockery in it. In offering to return my canvases to me after all those years, with the absent-minded approval of Matsumoto, she was simply expressing her reluctance to see anything go to waste. "I'm the only one who cares one way or another," she said, "so you tell me what to do. You'd have to pick them up yourself," she said. "How did you know what they were?" I said. She had been a pre-nursing student at Skidmore College, she said, and had taken, as one of her precious few electives, a course in art appreciation. She was a registered nurse, like my first wife Dorothy, but had given up on that profession because doctors, she said, treated her like an idiot and a slave. Also, the hours were long and the pay was low, and she had an orphaned niece to support and keep company. Her art appreciation teacher showed her slides of famous pictures, and 2 of these were of Windsor Blue number 17, before and after it fell apart. "How can I thank him?" I said. "I think he was trying to lighten up the course," she said. "The rest of it was so serious." "Do you want the canvases or not?" she said. There was a long silence, so she finally said, "Hello? Hello?" "Sorry," I said. "That may seem like a simple question to you, but it's a biggie to me. To me, it's as though you called me up out of the blue on a day like any other day and asked me if I had grown up yet." If harmless objects like those rectangles of stretched canvas were hobgoblins to me, could fill me with shame, yes, with rage at a world which had entrapped me into being a failure and a laughingstock, and so on, then I wasn't a grown-up yet, although I was then 68 years old. "So what is your answer?" she said on the telephone. "I'm waiting for myself to hear it," I said. I had no use for the canvases, or so I thought back then. I honestly never expected to paint again. Storing them would be no problem, since there was plenty of space in the potato barn. Could I sleep well here with the worst of my embarrassments from my past right here on the property? I hoped so. I heard myself say this at last. "Please, don't throw them away. I will call Home Sweet Home Moving and Storage out here and have them picked up as soon as possible. Please tell me your name again so they can ask for you." And she said this: Mona Lisa Trippingham. When GEFCO hung Windsor Blue number 17 in its lobby, with fanfare about such an old company's keeping on top of the latest developments, not only in technology, but in the arts, the company's publicity people hoped to say that Windsor Blue number 17 was superlative in terms of size, if not the largest painting in the world, then at least the largest painting in New York City, or whatever. But there were several murals right in the city, and God knows in the world, which easily exceeded my painting's 512 square feet. The publicity people wondered if it might not be a record holder for a painting hung on a wall, ignoring the fact that it was in fact 8 separate panels mated in back with C-clamps. But that wouldn't do either, since it turned out that the Museum of the City of New York had 3 continuous paintings on canvas, stitched together, to be sure, as high as mine and as third again as long. They were curious artifacts, in an early effort at making movies, you might say, since they had rollers at either end. They could be unwound from one and rewound on the other. An audience could see only a small part of the whole at any time. These Brobdingnagian ribbons were decorated with mountains and rivers, and virgin forests and limitless grasslands on which buffalo grazed, and deserts where diamonds or rubies or gold nuggets might be had for the stooping. These were the United States of America. Lecturers traveled all over northern Europe with such pictures in olden times, with assistants to unroll one end and roll up the other. They urged all ambitious and able persons to abandon old tired Europe and lay claim to rich and beautiful properties in the promised land, which were practically theirs for the asking. Why should a real man stay home when he could be raping a virgin continent? I had the 8 panels purged of every trace of faithless sateen Duroluxes, and restretched and reprimed. I had them set up in the barn, dazzling white in their restored virginity, just as they had been before I transmuted them into Windsor Blue number 17. I explained to my wife that this eccentric project was an exorcism of an unhappy past, a symbolic repairing of all the damage I had done to myself and others during my brief career as a painter. That was yet another instance, though, of putting into words what could not be put into words, why and how a painting had come to be. The long and narrow barn, a century old, was as much a part of it all as all that white. The powerful floodlights dangling from tracks on the ceiling were part of it, pouring megawatts of energy into all that white sizing, making it far whiter than I could have believed white could ever be. I had caused those artificial suns to be installed when I received the commission to create Windsor Blue number 17. "What are you going to do with it next?" dear Edith asked. "It's done," I said. "Are you going to sign it?" she said. "That would spoil it," I replied. "A fly speck would spoil it." "Does it have a title?" she said. "Yes," I said, and I gave it a title on the spot, one as long as the title Paul Schlesinger had given his book on successful revolutions. "I tried and failed and cleaned up afterwards, so it's your turn now." I had my own death in mind, and what people would say about me afterwards. That was when I first locked up the potato barn, but with only a single padlock and hasp. I assumed, as my father had, and as most husbands do, that I would of course be the first of our pair to die. So I had whimsically self-pitying instructions for Edith as to what she was to do immediately following my burial. "Hold my wake in the barn, Edith," I said, "and when people ask you about all the white, you tell them that it was your husband's last painting, even though he didn't paint it, and then you tell them what the title is." But she died first, and only 2 months after that. Her heart stopped, and down she fell into a flower bed. "No pain," said the doctor. At her burial at noon in Green River Cemetery, in a grave only a few yards from those of the other 2 musketeers, Jackson Pollock and Terry Kitchen, I had my strongest vision yet of human souls unencumbered, unembarrassed by their unruly meat. There was this rectangular hole in the ground, and standing around it were all these pure and innocent neon tubes. Was I crazy? You bet. Her wake was in the home of a friend of hers, not mine, a mile up the beach from here. The husband did not attend. Nor did he re-enter this house. where he had been so useless and contented and loved without reason for 1/3 of his life and 1/4 of the 20th century. He went out to the barn, unlocked the sliding doors, and turned on the lights. He stared at all that white. Then he got into his Mercedes and drove to a hardware store in East Hampton, which carried art supplies. I bought everything a painter could ever wish for, save for the ingredient he himself would have to supply: soul, soul, soul. The clerk was new to the area, and so did not know who I was. He saw a nameless old man in a shirt and tie and a suit made to order by Izzy Finkelstein, and a patch over one eye. The Cyclops was in a high state of agitation. "You're a painter, are you, sir?" said the clerk. He was perhaps 20 years old. He hadn't even been born when I stopped painting, stopped making pictures of any kind. I spoke one word to him before leaving. This was it: Renaissance. The servants quit. I had become an untamed old raccoon again, who spent all his life in and around the potato barn. I kept the sliding doors closed so that nobody could see what it was that I did in there. I did it for 6 months. When I was done, I bought 5 more locks and hasps for the sliding doors and snapped them shut. I hired new servants and had a lawyer draw up a new will, which stipulated, as I have said, that I be buried in my Izzy Finkelstein suit, and that all I owned was to go to my 2 sons, provided that they did a certain thing in memory of their Armenian ancestors, and that the barn was not to be unlocked until after my burial. My sons have done quite well in the world, despite the horrors of their childhood. As I've said, their last name now is that of their good stepfather. Henri Steele is a civilian contract compliance officer at the Pentagon. Terry Steele is a publicity man for the Chicago Bears, which, since I owned a piece of the Cincinnati Bengals, makes us sort of a football family. Having done all that, I found I was able to take up residence in this house again, to hire new servants, and to become the empty and peaceful old man to whom Circe Berman addressed this question on the beach 4 months ago. "Tell me how your parents died." On her last night in the Hamptons, she now said to me, "Animal, vegetable, and mineral? All 3? "Word of honor," I said. "All 3. All 3. With colors and binders taken from creatures and plants and the ground beneath us, every painting was surely all 3. All 3. "Why won't you show it to me?" she said. "Because it is the last thing I have to give to the world," I said. "I don't want to be around when people say whether it is any good or not." "Then you are a coward," she said, "and that is how I will remember you." I thought that over, and then I heard myself say, "All right. I will go get the keys. And then, Mrs. Berman, I would be most grateful if you would come with me." Out into the dark we went, a flashlight beam dancing before us. She was subdued, humble, awed, and virginal. I was elated, high as a kite, and absolutely petrified. We walked on flagstones at first, but then they veered off in the direction of the carriage house. After that, we trod the stubble path cut through the wilderness by Franklin Cooley and his mowing machine. I unlocked the barn doors and reached inside, my fingers on the light switch. "Scared?" I said. "Yes," she said. "So am I said. Remember now, we were standing at the extreme right end of a painting 8 feet high and 64 feet long. When I turned on the floodlights, we would be seeing the picture compressed by foreshortening to a seeming triangle 8 feet high, but only 5 feet wide. There was no telling from that vantage point what the painting really was, what the painting was all about. I flicked on the switch. There was a moment of silence, and then Mrs. Berman gasped in wonderment. "Stay right where you are," I told her, "and tell me what you think of it." "I can't come any further?" she said. "In a minute," I said, "but first I want to hear you say what it looks like from here." "A big fence," she said. "Go on," I said. "A very big fence, an incredibly high and long fence," she said. every square inch of it encrusted with the most gorgeous jewelry. "Thank you very much," I said. "And now take my hand and close your eyes. I'm going to lead you to the middle, and you can look again." She closed her eyes, and she followed me as unresistingly as a toy balloon. When we were in the middle, with 32 feet of painting extending to either side, I told her to open her eyes again. We were standing on the rim of a beautiful green valley in the springtime. By actual count, there were 5,219 people on the rim with us or down below. The largest person was the size of a cigarette, and the smallest a fly speck. There were farmhouses here and there, and the ruins of a medieval watchtower on the rim where we stood. The picture was so realistic that it might have been a photograph. "Where are we?" said Circe Berman. "Where I was," I said, "when the sun came up, the day the Second World War ended in Europe." 35. It is all part of the regular tour of my museum now. First come the doomed little girls on swings in the foyer, and then the earliest works of the first abstract expressionists, and then the perfectly tremendous whatchamacallit in the potato barn. I have unspiked the sliding doors at the far end of the barn so that the greatly increased flow of visitors can move past the whatchamacallit without eddies and backwash. In one end they go, and out the other. Many of them will go through 2 times or more. Not the whole show, just through the potato barn. Ha! No solemn critic has yet appeared. Several laymen and laywomen have asked me, however, to say what sort of painting I would call it. I told them what I will tell the first critic to show up, if one ever comes, and one may never come, since the whatchamacallit is so exciting to the common people. It isn't a painting at all. It's a tourist attraction. It's a world fair. It's a Disneyland. It is a gruesome Disneyland. Nobody is cute there. On an average, there are 10 clearly drawn World War II survivors to each square foot of the painting. Even the figures in the distance, no bigger than fly specks, when examined through one of several magnifying glasses I keep in the barn, prove to be concentration camp victims or slave laborers or prisoners of war from this or that country, or soldiers from this or that military unit on the German side, or local farmers and their families, or lunatics set free from asylums, and on and on. There is a war story to go with every figure in the picture, no matter how small. I made up a story and then painted the person it had happened to. I at first made myself available in the barn to tell anyone who asked what the story was of this person or that one, but soon gave up in exhaustion. Make up your own war stories as you look at the whatchamacallit, I tell people. I stay in the house here and simply point the way out to the potato barn. That night with Circe Berman, though, I was glad to tell her any of the stories she wished to hear. "Are you in there?" she said. I pointed out myself at the bottom and right, above the floor. I pointed with the toe of my shoe. I was the largest figure, the one as big as a cigarette. I was also the only one of the thousands with his back to the camera, so to speak. The crack between the 4th and 5th panels ran up my spine and parted my hair, and might be taken for the soul of Rabo-Karabakian. "This man clinging to your leg is looking up at you as though you were God," she said. "He is dying of pneumonia and will be dead in 2 hours," I said. "He is a Canadian bombardier who was shot down over an oil field in Hungary. He doesn't know who I am. He can't even see my face. All he can see is a thick fog which isn't there, and he's asking me if we are home yet." "And what are you telling him?" she said. "What would you tell him?" I said. "I'm telling him, yes, we're home, we're home." "Who is this man in the funny-looking suit?" she said. "That is a concentration camp guard who threw away his SS uniform and stole the suit from a scarecrow," I said. I pointed out a group of concentration camp victims far away from the masquerading guard. Several of them were on the ground and dying, like the Canadian bombardier. "He brought these people to the valley and dumped them, but doesn't know where to go next. Anybody who catches him will know he is an SS man, because he has his serial number tattooed on his upper left arm. And these two? She said. Yugoslavian partisans, I said. This one, she said. A sergeant major in the Moroccan Sfahis, captured in North Africa, I said. And this one, with a pipe in his mouth, she said. A Scottish glider pilot, captured on D-Day, I said. They're just from everywhere, aren't they, she said. This is Gurkha here, I said, all the way from Nepal. And this machine gun squad in German uniforms, they're Ukrainians who changed sides early in the war. When the Russians finally reach the valley, they'll be hanged or shot. There doesn't seem to be any women, she said. Look closer, I said. Half the concentration camp people and half the people from the lunatic asylums are women. They just don't look much like women anymore. They aren't what you might call movie stars. There don't seem to be any healthy women, she said. Wrong again, I said. You'll find healthy ones at either end, in the corners at the bottom. We went to the extreme right end for a look. My goodness, she said. It's like a display in a museum of natural history. So it was. There was a farmhouse down at the bottoms of both ends, each one buttoned up tight like a little fort, its high gates closed, and all the animals in the courtyard. And I had made a schematic cut through the earth below them, so as to show their cellars too, just as a museum display might give away the secrets of animals' burrows underground. The healthy women are in the cellar with the beets and potatoes and turnips, I said. They are putting off being raped for as long as possible, but they have heard the history of other wars in the area, so they know that rape will surely come. Does the picture have a title? She said, rejoining me at the middle. Yes, it does, I said. What is it? She said. And I said, Now it's the women's turn. Am I crazy? She said, indicating a figure lurking near the ruined watchtower. Or is this a Japanese soldier? That's what he is, I said. He's a major in the army. You can tell that from the gold star and the 2 brown stripes on the cuff of his left sleeve. And he still has his sword. He would rather die than give up his sword. I'm surprised that there were any Japanese there, she said. There weren't, I said, but I thought there should be one there, so I put one there. Why? She said. Because, I said, the Japanese were as responsible as the Germans for turning Americans into a bunch of bankrupt militaristic fuck-ups, after we'd done such a good job of being sincere war-haters after the First World War. And this woman lying here, she said, she's dead? She's dead, I said. She's an old queen of the gypsies. She's so fat, she said. Is she the only fat person? Everybody else is so skinny. Dying is the only way to get fat in Happy Valley, I said. She's as fat as a circus freak because she's been dead 3 days. Happy Valley, echoed Sears. Or peacetime, or heaven, or the Garden of Eden, or springtime, or whatever you want to call it, I said. She's the only one who's all alone, said Sears. Or is she? Just about, I said. People don't smell too nice after they've been dead 3 days. She was the first stranger to arrive in Happy Valley, and she came all alone, and she died almost right away. Where are the other gypsies, she said. Oh, with their fiddles and tambourines and brightly painted caravans, I said, and their reputation for thieving, which was much deserved. Mrs. Berman told me a legend about gypsies I had never heard before. They stole the nails from the Roman soldiers who were about to crucify Jesus, she said. When the soldiers looked for the nails, they had disappeared mysteriously. Gypsies had stolen them, and Jesus and the crowd had to wait until the soldiers sent for new nails. After that, God Almighty gave permission to all gypsies to steal all they could. She pointed to the bloated gypsy queen. She believed that story. All gypsies do. Too bad for her that she believed it, I said. Or maybe it didn't matter whether she believed it or not, since she was starving to death when she arrived all alone in Happy Valley. She tried to steal a chicken from the farmhouse, I said. The farmer saw her from this bedroom window, and took a shot at her with a small-caliber rifle he kept under his feather mattress. She ran away. He thought he had missed her, but he hadn't. She had a little bullet in her abdomen, and she lay down there and died. 3 days later, the rest of us came along. If she's a queen of the gypsies, where are her subjects? Searcy asked again. I explained that she had been queen of only about 40 people at the peak of her power, including babies in arms. While there were notorious disputes in Europe as to which races and sub-races were vermin, all Europeans could agree that the thieving, fortune-telling, child-stealing gypsies were the enemies of all decent humankind. So they were hunted down everywhere. The queen and her people gave up their caravans, and their traditional costumes too, gave up everything which might identify themselves as gypsies. They hid in forests in the daytime and foraged for food at night. One night, when the queen went out alone to look for food, one of her subjects, a 14-year-old boy, was caught stealing a ham from a Slovak mortar squad, which had deserted the German lines on the Russian front. They were headed home, which wasn't far from Happy Valley. They made the boy lead them to the gypsy camp, where they killed everybody. So when the queen came back, she didn't have any subjects. Such was the story I made up for Searcy Berman. Searcy provided the missing link in the narrative. So she wandered into Happy Valley looking for other gypsies, she said. Right, I said. But there weren't many gypsies to be found anywhere in Europe. Most of them had been rounded up and gassed in extermination camps, which was fine with everybody. Who likes thieves? She took a closer look at the dead woman and turned away in disgust. Ugh, she said. What's coming from her mouth? Blood and maggots? Rubies and diamonds, I said. She smells so awful and looks like such bad luck that nobody has come close enough to notice yet. And all of these people here, she said wonderingly. Who will be the first to notice? I indicated the former concentration camp guard in the rags of a scarecrow. This man, I said. 36. Soldiers, 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 she marveled. Uniforms, uniforms, uniforms. The uniforms, what was left of them, were as authentic as I could make them. That was my homage to my master, Dan Gregory. Fathers are always so proud the first time they see their sons in uniform, she said. I know Big John Karpinski was, I said. He is my neighbor to the north, of course. Big John's son, Little John, did badly in high school, and the police caught him selling dope. So he joined the army while the Vietnam War was going on, and the first time he came home in uniform, I never saw Big John so happy, because it looked to him as though Little John was all straightened out and would finally amount to something. But then Little John came home in a body bag. Big John and his wife Doreen, incidentally, are dividing their farm, where three generations of Karpinskis grew up, into 6-acre lots. It was in the local paper yesterday. Those lots will sell like hotcakes, since so many of the second-story windows of houses built on them overlooking my property will have a water view. Big John and Doreen will become cash millionaires in a condominium in Florida, where winter never comes. So they are losing their own sacred plot of earth at the foot of their own Mount Ararat, so to speak, without experiencing that ultimate disgrace, a massacre. Was your father proud of you when he saw you for the first time in a uniform? Searcy asked me. He didn't live to see it, I said, and I'm glad he didn't. If he had, he would have thrown an awl or a boot at me. Why? She said. Don't forget that it was young soldiers whose parents thought they were finally going to amount to something who killed everybody he'd ever known and loved. If he'd seen me in a uniform, he would have bared his teeth like a dog with rabies. He would have said, swine! He would have said, pig! He would have said, murderer! Get out of here! What do you think will eventually become of this painting? She said. Well, it's too big to throw away, I said. Maybe it'll go to that private museum in Lubbock, Texas, where they have the most paintings by Dan Gregory. I thought it might wind up behind the longest bar in the world, wherever that is, probably in Texas too. but the customers would be climbing up on the bar all the time, trying to see what was really going on, kicking over glasses, stepping on the complimentary hors d'oeuvres. I said that it would eventually be up to my 2 sons, Terry and Henri, to decide what was to become of Now It's the Woman's Turn. "You're leaving it to them?" she said. She knew that they hated me, and had had their last name legally changed to that of Dorothy's second husband, Roy, the only real father they'd ever had. "You think it's kind of a joke to leave them this?" said Circe. "You think it's worthless? I'm here to tell you, this is a terribly important painting some way." "I think maybe it's terribly important the same way a head-on collision is important," I said. "There's undeniable impact. Something has sure as hell happened." "You leave those ingrates this," she said, "and you'll make them multi-millionaires." "Well, they'll be that in any case," I said. "I'm leaving them everything I own, including your pictures of the little girls in swings and the pool table, unless you want those back. After I die, they'll have to do only one little thing to get it all." "What's that?" she said. "Merrily have their names and those of my grandchildren legally changed back to Carabachean," I said. "You care that much?" she said. "I'm doing it for my mother," I said. "She wasn't even a Carabachean by birth, but she was the one who wanted, no matter where, no matter what, the name Carabachean to live on and on." "How many of these are portraits of actual people?" she said. "The bombardier clinging to my leg. That's his face, as I remember it. These 2 Estonians in German uniforms are Laurel and Hardy. This French collaborator here is Charlie Chaplin. These 2 Polish slave laborers on the other side of the tower from me are Jackson Pollock and Terry Kitchen." "So there you are across the bottom, the 3 Musketeers," she said. "There we are," I agreed. "The death of the other 2 so close together must have been a terrible blow to you," she said. "We'd stopped being friends long before then," I said. "It was all the boozing we did together that made people call us that. It didn't have anything to do with painting. We could have been plumbers. One or the other of us would stop drinking for a little while, and sometimes all 3 of us. And that was that for the 3 Musketeers, long before the other 2 killed themselves. Quite a blow, you say, Mrs. Berman? Not at all. The only thing I did after I heard about it was become a hermit for 8 years or so." "And then Rothko killed himself after that," she said. "Yep," I said. "We were extricating ourselves from Happy Valley and returning to real life. The melancholy roll call of real-life suicides among the abstract expressionists again. Gorky by hanging in 1948. Pollock, and then almost immediately Kitchen, by drunken driving, and then pistol in 1956. And then Rothko, with all possible messiness, by knife in 1970. I told her with sharpness which surprised me, and surprised her too, that those violent deaths were like our drinking, and had nothing to do with our painting. "I certainly won't argue with you," she said. "Really," I said. "Word of honor," I said, my vehemence unspent. "The whole magical thing about our painting, Mrs. Berman, and this was old stuff in music, but it was brand new in painting. It was pure essence of human wonder, and wholly apart from food, from sex, from clothes, from houses, from drugs, from cars, from news, from money, from crime, from punishment, from games, from war, from peace. And surely apart from the universal human impulse among painters and plumbers alike towards inexplicable despair and self-destruction." "You know how old I was when you were standing on the rim of this valley?" she said. "No," I said. 1 year old, she said. "And I don't mean to be rude, Raybo, but this picture is so rich. I don't think I can look at it any more tonight." "I understand," I said. We had been out there for 2 hours. I myself was all worn out, but also twangingly proud and satisfied. So there we were, back in the doorway again, and I had my hand on the light switch, since there were no stars that night and no moon. A flick of that switch would plunge us into total darkness. She asked me this: Is there anything anywhere in the picture which says when and where this happened? Nothing to say where it was, I said. There's one place that says when it was, but that's at the other end and way up high. If you really want to see it, I'll have to get not only a stepladder, but a magnifying glass. Some other time, she said. I described it for her. There's this Maori, a corporal in the New Zealand Field Artillery who was captured in a battle outside Tobruk, Libya. I'm sure you know who the Maoris are, I said. They're Polynesians, she said. They're the Aborigines of New Zealand. Exactly, I said. They were cannibals and were divided into many warring tribes until the white man came. So this Polynesian is sitting on a discarded German ammunition box. There are 3 bullets still in the bottom of it, in case anybody needs one, and is trying to read what is an inside page from a newspaper. He has grabbed it as it scuttled across the valley in the breeze that came with sunrise. I went on, my fingertips touching the light switch. The page is from an anti-Semitic weekly published in Riga, Latvia, during the German occupation of that little country. It is 6 months old and offers tips on gardening and home canning. The Maori is studying it very earnestly in the hopes of learning what we would all like to know about ourselves. Where he is, what is going on, and what is likely to happen next. If we had a stepladder and a magnifying glass, Mrs. Berman, you could see for yourself that written in tiny characters on the ammunition box is this date, when you were only 1 year old. May 8th, 1945. I took one last look at Now It's the Women's Turn, which was foreshortened again into a seeming triangle of close-packed jewels. I did not have to wait for the neighbors and Celeste's schoolmates to arrive before knowing that it was going to be the most popular painting in my collection. Jesus, Sears, I said. It looks like $1 million. It really does, she said. Out went the lights. 37. When we sauntered back to this house through the darkness, she held my hand, and she said I had taken her dancing after all. When was that? I said. We're dancing now, she said. Oh, I said. She said again that she couldn't imagine how I or anybody could have made such a big, beautiful painting about something so important. I can't believe I did it myself, I said. Maybe I didn't. Maybe it was done by potato bugs. She said that she looked at all the Polly Madison books in Celeste's room one time and couldn't believe she'd written them. Maybe you're a plagiarist, I said. That's what I feel like sometimes, she said. When we reached this house, and although we had not and never would make love, our moods were postcoital. May I say, without seeming boastful, that I had never seen her so languorous. She surrendered her body, ordinarily so restless, so twitchy and itchy, to a voluptuously cushioned easy-chair in the library. Marilee Kemp was in the room, too, in a ghostly way. The bound volume of letters she had written to an Armenian child in California was on the coffee table between me and Mrs. Berman. I asked Mrs. Berman what she would have thought if the barn had been empty, or if the 8 panels had been blanks, or if I had reconstructed Windsor Blue No. 17. If you had really been that empty, which I thought you were, she said, I guess I would have had to give you an A+ for sincerity. I asked her if she could write. I meant letters to me, but she thought I meant books. That's all I do, that and dancing, she said. As long as I keep that up, I keep grief away. All summer long, she had made it easy to forget that she had recently lost a husband who was evidently brilliant and funny and adorable. One other thing helps a little bit, she said. It works for me. It probably wouldn't work for you. That's talking loud and brassy, telling everybody when they're right and wrong, giving orders to everybody. Wake up, cheer up, get to work. Twice now I've been a Lazarus, I said. I died with Terry Kitchen, and Edith brought me back to life again. I died with dear Edith, and Sears Berman brought me back to life again. Whoever that is, she said. We talked some about Gerald Hildreth, the man who would come at 8 in the morning to take her and her luggage to the airport in his taxicab. He was a local character, about 60 years old. Everybody out this way knows Gerald Hildreth and his taxicab. He used to be on the rescue squad, I said, and I think he and my first wife might have had a little fling. He was the one who found Jackson Pollock's body 60 feet from where his car hit the tree. Then, in a few weeks, he was gathering up the pieces of Terry Kitchen's head in a plastic bag. You'd have to say he's played an important role in art history. The last time I rode with him, she said, he told me his family had been working hard out here for 300 years, but that all he had to show for it was his taxicab. It's a nice taxicab, I said. Yes, he keeps it polished on the outside and vacuumed on the inside, she said. I guess that's how he keeps grief away. Whatever it is he's got to grieve about. 300 years, I said. We worried about Paul Slazenger. I speculated as to what his helpless soul must have felt like when it realized that his meat had thrown itself down on a hand grenade which was about to go off. Why didn't it kill him, she said. Unforgivably sloppy workmanship at the hand grenade factory, I said. His meat did that, and your meat made the picture in the potato barn, she said. Sounds right, I said. My soul didn't know what kind of picture to paint, but my meat sure did. She cleared her throat. Well then, she said, isn't it time for your soul, which had been ashamed of your meat for so long, to thank your meat for finally doing something wonderful? I thought that over. That sounds right too, I said. You have to actually do it, she said. How? I said. Hold your hand in front of your eye, she said, and look at those strange and clever animals with love and gratitude, and tell them out loud, Thank you, meat. So I did. I held my hands in front of my eyes, and I said out loud, and with all my heart, Thank you, meat. Oh, happy meat. Oh, happy soul. Oh, happy Rabo Karabakian. You have been listening to Bluebeard, a novel by Kurt Vonnegut Jr., read by me, Ron Gabaldon. It seems we made it through more or less intact. Enjoy this moment, wherever it finds you, and remember to thank your meat.